Okay, welcome everyone. It is noon on the mark. I'm letting people in. I expect that we're probably going to have more people who want to join this Zoom than will actually, because we're limited to, I think, 100 people, and I think about 150 or a little under that signed up. So uh, welcome. This is being recorded, and we'll be posting that. So folks who can't make it will have access to it. And if you need to go back and look at anything, you'll have that opportunity. So let me start by saying, my name is Dave Peaty. I am the acting VP for Publishing Professionals Network. We are an all-volunteer nonprofit that is dedicated to celebrating the best in books, and also supporting folks in the publishing community. And we are really fortunate today to have two folks from Faceout Studio who were award-winning designers in our last year's book show. And what's great is this sort of fits in with our mission, both parts of our mission, celebrating excellence in books, because we're going to see some excellent design and learn what made that possible. But it also is a way of them stepping up and talking about what makes a good book design successful for them. I'm not going to get too much in the way here. We'll start it really quickly, but I have a couple of announcements to make. One is that next month we have our annual conference. It's a day-long conference. It's here in Berkeley, California at the David Brower Center. It's filled with wonderful sessions on various aspects of book publishing. And this year's theme is Publishing for the Greater Good. I think it's really going to be wonderful. One of my fellow team members will put in the chat a link to the PPN website, and you can look for more details about the conference there. The other thing I want to say is, if you're not a PPN member, please consider joining. The entry level financially is very low. It's $25. That may go up. We'll see. So now's the time to do it. And I think there's a lot of wonderful things that PPN has to offer, but go to our website and check it out. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say for now. I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our two guests who are speaking today. Molly Van Borstel. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly, by the way?
It's Von Borstel. Yeah, that's a tough one.
Okay. And Tim Green, both who work for Faceout Studio. So let me go ahead and pin. There you go. And I'm just going to step back. I'm going to let you two introduce yourselves. People who signed up probably saw the brief bio that we included, but feel free to give any background and take it away. Thank you.
Great. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here. Hello to Barbara Burgoyne. I hope I'm getting your name right. I got to help with judging the AUP a few years ago with Barbara. So it's good to see you. So I'm Tim Green. I'm the creative director at Faceout Studio. So and no one can start creating until I say go. No, that's not really how it works, actually. But Molly goes rogue most of the time. Yeah, I've been at the studio for 19 years. It's crazy. I guess that means I was hired at page 14 or something like that. But yeah, why don't I share my screen and we can walk through a few things. So, okay. There we go. Everybody see that? I'll just give a quick intro to the studio, and then and Molly can introduce herself. So we're excited to talk about some of these covers and kind of go into the process behind the work we created. Let me see if I can. Oops. Trying to move my, there we go. So this is our studio. We're a small studio in Central Oregon. I think there's 11 of us. The studio's been around for about 25 years. Been a real pleasure to work on a team like this. I think we all kind of push each other to be better, and just the different backgrounds and perspectives that come from working on a team like this really make it interesting. Kind of some of our team here. That's Molly down in the middle. I started out as a professional here at this studio. So my first job out of college, other than working at Best Buy selling computers, was working here at Faceout Studio. And it's been a great introduction to publishing. The name Faceout, you know, it kind of speaks to what we're about. We used to get real excited about the books that we would design, and we go to the bookstore and kind of look around and see what other people were doing in the industry. And we were always struck by those covers that were standing out, face out in a sea of spines. Those ones that the booksellers put out, face out, they stood out. And whenever one of ours was featured, we just felt really cool. So that ended up becoming our name. And I think it speaks to the kind of celebration and appreciation of publishing that we're all about. So that's been kind of our who we are. I'll let Molly introduce herself, but let me just first say she's amazing. She just sent a presentation yesterday that had me extremely jealous. So I'll hand it over to you, Molly.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Molly von Borstel. I am an art director here at Faceout Studio. I have been here at the studio with everyone for almost 5 years now. I graduated from Oregon State University and got a job here with everyone right out of college. And I was super stoked, super grateful for the team. I've learned a lot, especially from Tim. And yeah, I also want to thank Dave for putting this on today. I think this is super cool to kind of just sit down and discuss book design. I don't feel like I get to do that super often. So diving in a little bit further, Tim, if you want to go to the next slide. Today I'm talking about American Amnesia, which is the cover that won the PPN award. Tim, do you want to mute for like half a second?
Oh, yes. Apologies.
I'm like, my mind's like hearing myself talking in the background.
Yeah, hang on real quick. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, today I'm talking about American Amnesia. It won the PPN award, and this book, American Amnesia, is by Helen Kriebel. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the process and how I created the different design concepts for this project, what the book's about, what the art direction was for this cover, and then the final result. So this book, American Amnesia, is discusses how memories and experiences shape who we are. And this applies not just to individuals, but nations as well, specifically America in this case. This is also true for when experiencing memory loss. And this memory loss results in a loss of identity, which has happened in the last few years in America, according to Helen Kriebel. And so she just discusses in this book how it's been lost over the years, why it's happening, and what can be done to recapture the history, culture, and the way of life in America. So when delivered the cover presentation or the design brief from Encounter Publishing, they asked for a cover that conceptualized this idea of something important that needed rediscovered, that has been lost or forgotten. So after reading and going through the brief, we I just dove into the process of creating a couple different cover designs, drawing on inspiration from other designers, and just diving in and into the mess of design until I came up with something I thought was working for that concept of something important and regaining something important lost and regaining or rediscovering it. So this first cover design that I threw into the presentation that we sent to Encounter was kind of this idea of this simple, smart die cut design, which cuts out which is cutouts of a fragmented American flag. And these cutouts would reveal this full image of the American flag on the case. I felt this concept and execution suggests our nation's foundation has been broken apart, shown through this fragmented, broken flag on the jacket design, and then the need to rediscover what America stands on, shown on the case. The next slide is the next concept that was in the presentation I delivered, and it showcases this prominent US landmark, the Capitol, kind of peeking through this ink blot shape, which suggests this idea of memory loss. The idea here was to take this concept, this ink blot, which suggests memory loss, and print it on a vellum jacket with a clear, so you could see clearly through the window the US Capitol. And then the next design, Tim, is the winner of the cover presentation. And this is also the winner of the PPN award. And it is a simple, clean, white, stark design, which conceptualizes the title itself. And what really sells it here, which I know no one's going to be able to see, but I also have the cover here. No, you can't see it. Is it's the special treatment that kind of sells this design, which is a blind spot gloss on the word American. And it's printed over a disappearing American, which suggests this loss of identity. So with the special treatment, you can see that American is there, but with the ink disappearing, it suggests this loss of identity, which is a fade rather than a complete disappearance. So highly conceptualized designs executed for this cover presentation, something simple, smart, that clearly express the concept that the client was wanting to create for this cover.
Awesome. Okay, Molly, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I think these are awesome covers, and I'm curious, were you most excited about the cover that was selected, or did you have another that you liked better, or what was the I mean, obviously the outcome was great. It won an award. I think they're all excellent designs. I'm just curious if one captured your imagination more than another.
I think the cover that was selected ended up being the winner of the group. I just really liked the highly conceptualized American disappearing through that blind spot gloss, and I just thought the execution on print really delivered that idea that I was trying to convey.
Awesome. Well, hey, I think we were having trouble there because Molly literally works right behind me, so we get this echo with our with the conversation on Zoom. But very cool stuff, Molly. I'll speak about the ones I got here, the covers that I participated in the PPN awards. So starting with Death of a Bookseller, I love kind of ironic titles. This was a lot of fun to work on. It didn't start well though. You know, it actually started with one of my coworkers who did some excellent covers, but they were missing the mark for the client. And we got in a situation where we were a couple of rounds in, and there wasn't a winner. We felt like we were kind of needing to start from square one, which kind of brings me to my point, something I come back to a lot, in this job is to just get uncomfortable. So in this case, you know, 2 rounds in, the client's unhappy. It's time to have a conversation. Let's come back around and see what we can do. Let's preserve a good relationship. Everybody's on the same team, wanting to be excellent. And so we kind of had a discussion just to kind of get back on the same page. But this idea of getting uncomfortable, it's kind of one of my mantras for how I want to grow as a designer. I think when we're comfortable, we're in our safe spot. That's where a lot of things tend to be kind of boring, or, you know, by definition, just kind of safe. And I think when we can break outside of that and surprise ourselves, that's where really interesting work comes from. So one way this happened for me, okay, so several years ago, back when I had sideburns, we're doing some cool work in Procreate on the iPad, and it's an uncomfortable thing. I hadn't worked on the iPad. I didn't know how to do that, but I wanted to get back with some of my initial interest in design, which was drawing. I just loved drawing as a kid, and wanted to incorporate that in more of my work. So I started playing with Procreate on the iPad, and this was my very first interaction with the iPad. I took an accidental selfie, and no one will let me live it down. So everybody's created memes out of it. Like I'm gazing into some, you know, fantastical world that I don't understand. Pretty soon I was sent on the Mars rover. So, you know, you got to have some fun with the mistakes you make, or the learning of this job, and just try not to take yourself too seriously. So with this project, where that came into play was after a couple rounds not working, I talked to the art director, and he really wanted something that would feature this bookstore that's prominent in the story in a way that we hadn't in the previous comps. And he had this idea of doing something with one of those talker cards that you see at the bookstore that'll promote different books, or give you know, advice on which books to read, or staff picks, things like that. So it reminded me of a project I'd worked on a few years before, which was called Ban This Book, which had to do with a young girl who was running a library out of her locker, a banned books library out of her locker. And I had this idea that I was playing with imagery to create, and it just looked cheesy, but I wanted to showcase this library in some way. And so I just decided, you know what, I gotta, you know, just go for it and try some things here. And, you know, as I looked at the stack type, it made me think of the shelves in that locker, and how this could be integrated into an illustration. Photography stuff that I was trying just did not work. Looked very stock, and I wanted to avoid that. I also had this image I had been playing with, that I don't know, something about it. It's nothing special. It's just tape. But there were some interesting textural elements to the tape, and I liked the colorful strips of tape. So I just started playing with that gray strip of tape to try to recreate this kind of terrible sketch I did with my mouse. This was before my Procreate days, so I was just literally drawing with a mouse in Photoshop. And I just started playing with this kind of funky illustration, and I liked how it turned out. And it was sort of a sketch at this point, but I thought it was enough to sell it in, and I sent it to the client, and they were completely amazed by my expression. No, actually didn't work out very well. I didn't like it. Project actually got killed, and you know, you enter the stages of grief, but such is this business. And I guess another point I want to make here is that nothing is wasted. That felt like a big waste of time. I spent a lot of time, you know, it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse to do illustration, and I kind of walked out on a limb, and the branch broke, and there I was. But I've learned over time that those efforts that's the magic. That's the stuff that grows you as a professional. And you're gonna fail, I mean, it gets said a lot, you know, fail forward. I think there's obviously truth in that. We want to, that's how you grow. So back to the bookseller, this is what it led to. So I had a project I thought it was suited for. It just didn't fly. I came back to it after discussing this with the art director, and I thought I had some real potential here, and I was able to finesse the illustration in a way I liked better, adding in the skull. The fun part was at the end, once this was approved, sort of a wild card, the art director's like, hey, can you put an African snail on there? And I was like, oh, sure, why not, you know? But I didn't have the manuscript at the time, but it turns out the main character had a pet African snail that would kind of they'd have at the bookstore, and they wanted kind of a fun sort of but also kind of sinister look, kind of riding that line. So this is where we ended up, and I'm really happy with it. Partly also because doing custom illustration is something it's a discipline I'm trying to learn, and taking those steps. Weed rules. So lots of research on this one, mostly by Molly. Yeah, this was a really, obviously a cool title, really interesting project. One of the things I try to do on the front end of any project is understand what I'm working on. So whether that's reading a portion of the manuscript, or it just having good information. So one of the things I'll just kind of talk about is, you know, related to trends or design trends. I think in general, as a studio, one of the things we try to do is be a concept-driven studio more than like a style-driven studio. So there's the water we're all swimming in the design community. It's amazing. We get inspired by the work going on around us. I think that's good. That's part of what I want in the mix of what informs my work. But when it comes to like originality and thinking outside of the box, I need a framework to kind of help me get there, because as you know, it can be a grind. You can be on a deadline, and deadlines don't always inspire the kind of thinking that is healthy. Sometimes they can push you to want to do the lowest common denominator, the easiest low-hanging fruit to get the job done. And so one of the things I've begun to do over the years that I've found to just be the most helpful is just ask what if a lot. What if I did this? What if I tried this? You know, what if Molly liked this cover? You know, what would that look like? This kind of thing. So, you know, for example, here, some of the covers that I did for this project, you know, what if a doobie was unrolling into a scroll, like speaking to, you know, rules. And this was an interesting book in that it's a double meaning in the title. There's this sense of celebration, like weed rules, you know, like a shirt that Molly might be wearing. And then there's also this kind of this sense of what's the framework for the laws surrounding weed. And the book's point is that the laws tend to be restrictive, but we need to shift to this more celebratory posture when it comes to framing, you know, the rules surrounding weed. So there's this joyful quality that I need to capture. So, you know, what if we had a doobie doing this? What about you know, the interesting shapes? You know, you have the shapes of a pot leaf are just super distinctive. So that's just a wide playground there. And I thought, you know what? It's got an interesting shape when it interacts with a star, like the star, you know, that related to America and politics and laws. So tying that in with some typography that speaks to almost like the founding fathers or something formal in that way. Playing with large type intersecting to kind of feel both like classic, but also fun and bold. Different colors, kind of like the colors bleeding into each other. Here, this, you know, typography is super important. I think that they're so expressive, the different type choices you make. I mean, it's half the battle right there. I thought this was a very, I thought this captured a feeling that fit this idea of weed and in a different way than the others. So one of the things we try to do on a presentation is not just have different iterations of the same idea, but very different looks and ideas in the mix. And here there's just this kind of directional play using the pot leaves and the arrows. One of the fun things with a short title is you can really play up the title. And I thought this would be an appropriate one to turn on its side and just make it huge. And as I was playing with that and playing with like the pot leaf and some of that, I started to just hide some of the leaves, or I played with them coming in and out or hidden behind the letters. And then I thought, what if they became the letters? And so I tried some that where all the letters were made of pot leaves, and that just felt like too much. But I liked how this approach started to speak to almost like weeds popping up around the country or something. Here it is, it's kind of been hidden and it's coming out for its, it's ready for its close-up or something like that. So conceptually, that's kind of what was behind there, which ended up being the winner. I think such a strong title. Sometimes you just need to let that do the talking. It was really helpful interacting with the publisher on this one. We just made some adjustments to color. As you can see here, things are woven into the title. It starts to kind of interrupt the read, and I like where we ended up with the subtitle just having its own elbow room and space. Pantone green, I mean, that's my last name. I got to be on brand, so that was really rewarding. So yeah, those are the covers kind of we wanted to share with you. I'll stop sharing the screen here. And I'd love to field questions. And please reserve the hard ones for Molly. And let's see, we'll look over.
Thank you. So this is Dave Petey again, and go ahead and put any questions that you have in the chat. I've got a couple that kind of popped up for me while we're waiting for people to kind of ask their questions. One, I'm a little curious, how many of you are now going into the offices? Is it back, with the pandemic, sometimes people are no longer working with each other in an office anymore.
Yeah, it did change our workflow. So, I mean, we got shut down as well, and that was disruptive. It wasn't as difficult as I think those of you in the big cities experienced, just because Central Oregon's a lot more of a wide open kind of expansive outdoorsy area. So what did happen is we all got on mobile workstations, which ended up being a really good thing for all of us. So now we're all on laptops, and we found that there was a mix of work from home and in studio that was the kind of the sweet spot. I mean, at least for me, Molly, I'm not sure how you feel about that, but there's a certain amount of just mojo that comes from being together, and just being able to pop over to someone's desk and say, "Hey man, what do you think of this? Like, what can I do to this cover to make it better?" And so that kind of collaboration and interaction, I think, is important. But so now what we do is we have 3 days in the studio, Monday through Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, everybody can work from home. I've enjoyed that mix. I don't know about you, Molly.
Yeah, I think it's been great. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, love everybody on this team. They're so talented, but we're also like really great friends too. And so we didn't want to give up that, like you said, camaraderie that happens when you come in a couple days a week. So it's a good blend, a good hybrid setup of grinding at home, but then also coming together and bouncing ideas off of each other and then grabbing a beer after work. So
that kind of ties into one of the other questions, which is how formalized a process do you have of running comps at any stage of the process by your colleagues before you present to the client?
Yeah, we do have a somewhat formal process for quality control, but it's really, we have a series of art directors working, basically we review each other's work. So each person has an art director that reviews their work. And we used to have sort of what I feel like was too much structure there, where it was redundant. It was like this process to get approval in-house before going to the client and getting approval. And that can be helpful, but it's almost like, is the juice worth the squeeze at some point? And I think with a team as talented and experienced as they are, we tried to make it a little less formalized so that their voice could come out in their work. Like, I don't want anybody's work looking like exactly like mine. I love and I value that we each approach the same project in a different way. And so the goal is to review the work and make sure the client objectives are met, and make sure it's of a quality that we can stand behind as a studio. So the work we send out there, we're all excited about it. We're all enthusiastic about it. But it's really between the art director and each person to land on, hey, do we feel good about this, or do we need to push into a different area? And so that's kind of what the process looks like.
Okay. And there's a question, are you only doing covers, or do you do interiors as well?
We do interiors. We have one employee, Paul Nielsen. He does a lot of interior work. That's the main part of his job. Then we like to, the rest of us, some will do a full interior, but more often, that's a specialized kind of craft. I'm amazed at all the codes and the structures that Paul's able to create to just keep things organized. But it might look like we create a template for a client that they are going to flow, or we'll create a template and work with Paul to implement it. So that sort of thing.
Also, from project to project, it varies a bit whether we're just designing the front cover or if we do the full front, back, spine mechanical. It kind of depends on what the project's asking for too. And we also, besides print covers, we also can work on audiobooks, podcast covers sometimes, but all within the cover genre.
Okay. Next question. One, you mentioned, Tim, that you didn't have the manuscript when you first started designing that, and that surprised a lot of folks. And is that pretty common because of the timing? Often, covers are the first thing that the client needs because they have to go into the catalogs and stuff. Do you find that that's something that happens a fair amount?
Yeah, more than I would like. And that was more born of, like you said, sometimes we're working on, let's say, a fiction project, and maybe we have a rough edit, or we don't even have that yet. There's a that's being worked on, and so in those cases, we just try to get as much information as we can. I think in the case of Death of a Bookseller, I had a couple chapters to work with. So, and I also came into the project midstream. Another designer had been immersed in it. So the process was a little different on that one, where I kind of did a download with that designer, like, tell me about this project. Let's look at your notes. And then I had a call with the client to come up to speed, and I read through those couple chapters, but I didn't have a full manuscript. So yeah, I think that can sound like a backwards process. And I think I would agree with that. It's not always practical to read every book. In a perfect world, that would be my goal. I mean, at least on the good books. But I find that reading at least a portion is especially helpful with fiction. So, if I'm working on a diet book, I maybe don't need to, do a deep, close reading of that. I can get good information from a publisher. I can try to discern the uniqueness of that book in a different way than fiction, where there's a voice of the author, there's the feeling that you experience when you read a book. Even if it's just a few chapters, you get a sense for the tone of the author and the feel of the book. And all of that is helpful. It might not be all the specifics of what happens, because you're not usually trying to recreate something super specific. You want to tease the reader with something that will draw them in. But to get that feeling right, that it captures the book correctly and appropriately, I think is important. So that's kind of how that one worked.
I like to call us visual storytellers too. So how can we uniquely represent this specific book on the cover? And so sometimes that requires diving a little bit into the manuscript to pull something unique that you might not be aware of unless you, deep dive into it and pull out something different.
Allison Law writes, for those who aren't art directors or those or who don't have a design background, do you have any advice for providing a good design brief to the cover designer?
Yeah, so say that first part again.
And basically, if there are definitely people here on this Zoom who are not designers, but they are working with designers, and basically, do you have any advice for instance, an acquisitions team and a marketing team who are going to be drafting the design brief for you? Like what works, what doesn't work, what's helpful without being overly, prescriptive?
Sure. Molly, you want to go ahead?
We're actually kind of doing a deep dive on our questionnaire that we send to briefs right now, and kind of reworking what we feel like is important right now and what we want to make sure we have when diving into a cover project. I think obviously, besides like synopsis and breakdown of what the book's about, I find it helpful to see cover design inspiration. So what the client's drawn to, how they, as it refers to like tone, stylistic preferences, what genre this or just topic fits into. So just seeing actual visual representation of what someone is drawn to is helpful for me.
I agree. I like to get a sense for the kinds of hey, this is, I remember a period where every brief referenced, girl with a dragon tattoo. It didn't matter. I could be working on a diet book and there's girl with a dragon tattoo. And it's like, okay, yes, it did really well. It's a cool cover. But what's helpful is to get, some tailored visual reference that says, hey, I like this about this cover, or this feels like, the visuals aren't right, but the tone has the right feeling, or the impact it has on the reader is right. So some of that, where it's not just dumped in there with no explanation, but there's a sense for the why behind a visual reference, I think can be helpful. So yeah, and when we'll look at a brief, if we don't feel like we have enough information, then a lot of times then it's helpful to get on a phone call and ask specific questions. But I'm always looking I want to know kind of what you want the reader to feel when you pick up this book. And I want to marry that with what the book is, like who's it for, what's it about. I think in a perfect world, there's those things align, but sometimes as a book designer, you have to be an advocate for the author and their intent and the kind of book that it is. And maybe the publishing team wants to pitch it a certain way, but it's not consistent with the book. So I want to marry those things and have those aligned. So I think it's important to honor the book. Somebody's spent a lot of time getting it out into the wild and to their readers, understanding how to present the book. It's a multifaceted thing, but tone is really important. So that's one I try to get at a lot.
And who the book's speaking to, I think, is also important. The target audience who, you're trying to have pick up the book.
And I also, it is helpful to know, are there ideas that you guys want us to explore? So we try to evaluate, hey, these are some this is something that the client really wants. And we try not to, we want to be architects, not bricklayers, if that makes sense, where we are diagnosing the project on our own, independent from the publisher as well, because I think that's where we can bring some value. So I want to honor and understand the ideas of the publisher or the author, but also come up with my own conclusions about what could be interesting. And so one of the things that we try to do is always have like a wild card design that maybe there's a couple in the mix that directly represent something the client is asking for in a certain way. But what's that out of the box, you know, expression that really captures the book in a different way? We want to always kind of be pushing that direction, because often those more surprising ideas, they can win out. They can, you know, attract a reader in a different way. So.
And do you present like 3 different comps to a client, or do they tell you how many they want, or first round?
Yeah, 3 is kind of the minimum, unless a project has been scoped. Some publishers want, you know, that can be a way where we can adjust the budget to fit the needs of a publisher, and maybe we do 2 comps in that scenario. But generally, 3 comps is what we like to present, and 3, and we'll do more than that, but at least 3. I feel like that gives a good range. It's a good practice as a designer to push yourself and try different ideas, and if you have to do 3 unique ideas, I think that's a good sweet spot for growing professionally, for giving the client what they need as far as seeing different ideas explored, and that seems to work well.
Okay. Michael Rowley asks, do you do many animated covers? And I want to pair that with another question, which is this thing that comes up in the especially in the cover design world so much, which is, you know, you're not just designing a book cover for sale in a bookstore. You also are designing a cover for a book that's going to be sold on Amazon, and the first time the client's going to see it is underneath another book that, like, you might also like this, and it's a little tiny cover, and you have to have a title that's readable at this small size. So there's this range of having to design for this little tiny thing, and then having the option of designing depending on what it's going to be used for, and having it be an animated thing. So I just thought if you could talk to that a little bit.
I think our favorite thing to hear is, can you make sure we can read it at thumbnail?
Yeah, that's what gets us up in the morning. No, but it is a concern, though. It's more and more, it's an important part of what the clients are looking for. I honestly often am a little bit rebellious towards that idea, because I think on digital platforms you've got the title there anyway. But it is a real need that clients have, and so I think with things like that, I don't want it to just limit our exploration. Sometimes a quiet, you know, lots of white space, smaller title can be the right move, and I don't want to just eliminate that out of hand. I think in those cases, maybe we'd send 4 comps and include the one that we feel strongly about, if it pushes away from the mindset of the desire for something to read a thumbnail. I mean, I don't think a book cover always has to be read from space. I think some of those deliberate choices can enhance a design, or create, you know, an impact in a different way. But yeah, we try to. Sometimes it's interesting too. Like, we've done some work with Netflix, and that there's a whole different ballgame there, where they're translating a title, like a title design, for example. You know, it's going to be translated into hundreds of different languages. So maybe we have this really integrated, illustrated type arrangement, and that's great in the US, but the moment it goes to Japan to be translated there, they can't use that visual anymore. So there's this need to be very simple in how how the typography is expressed so that it can be picked up in other languages. So an important part of the job as designer is to know what the needs are. And I don't think it's a good posture for us to look down our nose at the needs of the project and and try to stand on our ivory tower and act like that's not valid and look at me, I'm an artist. It's more like, how do we take all of the criteria and the needs of the client and create something that's compelling? And that's feels like it can be restrictive to creativity, but that's actually where real creativity happens. It's when you can bring together all those different variables in a way that sings. And so I'd rather approach a project that's where they really want a big title for the thumbnail and just know that going into it and say, okay, how can I make this really interesting? How can I do this in a way that suits the book well? And then just don't eliminate ideas that push against that, because I think at the end of the day, clients hire us to try to make their work compelling. And if we have a different idea for that, I think it's a disservice to them not to have the confidence to share that. You know what I mean?
Okay, we have about 15 minutes left if we're going to limit ourselves to an hour, not that we have to, but we generally try to do something like that. So I'm going to try to work through some of these questions pretty quickly. With a name like Faceout Studios, John Berry writes, how much importance do you give to the spine?
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, sometimes the spine is a huge part of the design. I think some presentations I've actually sent a full cover spine design just to sell the design further. So I think the full jacket design can really sell the whole cover in itself.
Yeah, I agree. I think not every project is going to have an interesting spine idea, but I think we all want a book to look like it's fully realized. So even the interior, I don't know if a pet peeve of mine is when I go to read a book and there's this really distinctive cover design, and then you open the book and it's clearly a repack of an interior that was done for a different edition and it doesn't match up at all. And I just don't think that presents the content well. It's inconsistent, and that can happen from cover to spine. Maybe you have this, you do all this work on a front cover design, and then there's this hard break and a really unimaginative spine, and it's like, come on, let's see this all the way through. And I think that's just taking pride in your work, and that is really going to present the author's work in a more fully realized way. I love it when a jacket incorporates the entire jacket, not just the cover, where something extends onto the spine, into the back cover, or maybe they're different panels of an idea and you've got something featured on the front and then something different completely that complements it on the spine or the back cover. So all of that's just the playground of the designer, and we really enjoy exploring those all those avenues. So
and then can you talk a little bit about working with different types of clients, specifically if you're working, for instance, with a big publishing company that has an art director versus a small press that you might just be dealing with the publisher or an acquiring editor, a non-design person.
want to take that one, Molly?
I'm thinking on that one. Can you repeat the question again?
So basically, say you've got you're asked to do a cover design for a big press, and you get this, wonderful design brief from an art director who really knows how to communicate with a designer like you, versus a publisher wants you to do a book cover design, and they say make it look like the Dragon Tattoo book. So they don't really have any design. They don't necessarily have a lot of experience speaking the design speak, or just how to communicate.
I think speaking on that part where there isn't that language established already, I think just hopping on a call is usually the most helpful for just breaking down what they're seeing for cover and direction. I think when comparing bigger clients to smaller clients, I think there is a little bit more of an intimate interaction between smaller clients, whereas like Amazon is one of our bigger clients, and there are definitely a few more hoops to jump across with them. But overall, just establishing that line of communication, even if that's hopping on a call, is helpful in breaking down ideas if the clarity isn't there initially.
Okay.
Yeah. I think one of the,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's challenges and there's real value in the way our studio is structured. One of the challenges is we work with publishers all through the country, big, small, all different kinds of subjects and genres. And I think that gives a good bird's eye view of the world of publishing. And it really does put a lot of responsibility on us for drawing from the client what we need to do the job well. And that happens in different ways at a big publisher or a university press or a small publisher, or maybe a first-time author who just approaches the studio to self-publish their book. So, and I think one of the challenges presented there is we're not always in the room when decisions are being made. That can be frustrating, where you would like to have more interaction with the with that project in that way, but sometimes that's a blessing. It's like we don't want to be downstream of all the decisions, but it can be helpful to work efficiently and be given good direction from. I was talking to Lucy Kim about this when we were doing the AUP award judging. And I was just kind of expressing how, I don't want our team to be insulated from the actual real feedback of clients. And how do you do that when you're far away and you're not in the room in the meetings? And I was just kind of expressing how I would love to have more of that interaction. And Lucy's kind of like, no, you don't want that. It's like, you don't want to be there when this editor is, waxing poetic about the thing you've heard 100 times and the inner politics of how the sausage is made. That's just part of what we all signed up for. It's a challenging business, creative work. Everybody's got ideas, and there's a lot of different divisions within publishing: editorial, marketing, sales, design. And I think early in my career, my tendency was to think, oh, they didn't like this because they don't get it. They're out of touch or something. But what I've learned is these are smart people, and in fact, smarter than me most of the time. And we're all trying to get something out there that's worthwhile. And so the challenge is trying to align all of those different voices into something that still sings at the end of the day. And I think some larger publishers, for example, there's more layers and it's like there's a committee behind the decision making, and that can water down a design. It absolutely can, but it is also our job to kind of help guide that process to a good conclusion and not just allow everything to kind of get turned bland, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think overall it's about good communication, just being open with the clients and having a two-way street and talking.
We're seeing that in every single professional development session that we do. That's like the take-home message, is like, communicate. Okay, Jennifer Kahn is asking something that I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds. Do you use any AI tools like Midjourney to create images? What are publishers' policies about that, or authors' thoughts? I want to also toss in there, like, you must be, as a company and a group, thinking about what the future holds around AI stuff and how you're going to sort of manage that as well. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we've definitely begun exploring what, I think one of the important things in this line of work is to understand what's going on in the industry. And AI is absolutely something that's transforming just about every industry. So we want to understand that what's possible, what the pros and cons are. Our policy right now is we don't use any generative AI on covers. And I think most publishers are in that camp where there's just a whole lot of legal mire to sort through there. Authors don't want their books being put in the pool of all of the literary information that AI is going to draw on to create new work. I think it's the same with visuals. So all of the things that are informing the generative tools, we can't go and verify that that's been copyrighted or paid for. So it's at this point, it would be a legal nightmare for us to present work that's AI generated on a cover. And I think there's lawsuits that are going on related to that in a variety of ways. That doesn't mean our head's in the sand and we don't think AI has a purpose or is going to be useful. I think the way I look at it is it's likely going to become a tool that that we're going to need to understand how to use well. And it gets back to kind of my point about asking what if a lot. You could similarly to AI, your whole design process could be, I'm going to go on a stock site and enter some keywords and see what ideas they throw at me. Or I'm going to jump on Pinterest and just, pick up a bunch of ideas that have already been done. I think that's, it's stunting your own growth and your own ability. And I think part of what we do as designers is if everyone's going to zig, we need to zag. We need to do something that's going to stand out from in the marketplace. It's going to fit the genre, but it's going to push towards something that's going to attract attention. And if it looks exactly like everything else, that doesn't serve that goal. And I think I'm seeing a lot of AI looking very similar. But I do think it's powerful. It's pretty fascinating. I think what we're starting to see now are image stock sites, for example, who are creating arrangements with their photographers where they're agreeing to become a closed artificial intelligence pool. So let's say you're at Getty or you're at Adobe and you want to use their AI tool. Well, if they can show you that they have licensed the work or they have agreements with their photographers, that's probably going to be a next place where generative work might find its way into publishing. That's just my guess. But Molly, did you have any thoughts there?
I just think right now we're in the space of just researching and staying in the know, learning about ways that we could in the future use it as a tool rather than as a solution to take our job kind of thing. I think that's not the goal. It's just how to use it as a tool and help us be more efficient in the future. But again, yeah, not quite there using it.
Okay. Michael Rowley asks, do you do any focus group testing or do you get any data on how a cover may have influenced sales? So my guess is that's more happening at a big publisher or Amazon kind of place, but it is true that, often the end reader is sort of a different mindset than both the designer and the publisher.
Yeah. We do have some clients that every project we work on, they put in a focus group. And that can be it can be frustrating sometimes, honestly. But it's kind of like there's so many interested parties on the outcome of a book cover. And some publishers, man, the editors, they have all the sway. And so you realize that the decision makers are the editors, and others it's marketing. Some publishers really focus on the end reader, and so they have this focus group strategy. And in those cases, like one client we work with, they need four unique designs that they vet, and then they put them out to a focus group. And it's an interesting process. I don't always love it, but I find it fascinating that there's times when I'm convinced this one cover, that's the right cover, and I love it. And I've given talks before where I've shown a cover that was selected and the cover that's my favorite, and I don't tell the audience which is which, and I just say, hey, which one do you guys think is the best? And they'll split the room. So it's a little bit fascinating to get into the psychology of what makes people want to pick up a book. And I think some clients put a lot of emphasis there, and that can work. I don't always think it's fruitful, but there can be helpful input there.
How much time do you usually get from them giving you a design brief to coming up with the first comp? Generally, I know this varies, I'm sure.
Usually a project comes in with the brief and we have time to review it. I would say like a couple weeks in advance. Give us time to hop on a phone call if needed, break down some ideas with the client, and then we'll move forward. And we'll have generally, Tim, would you say like a couple days to really dive in and create the design?
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times it's 2 to 3 days, and I will say the good of that is you learn to surface good ideas more quickly, and that amount of volume, you definitely put the reps in and you get better. But I will often, I find myself robbing Peter to pay Paul. Maybe I get in a good position on one project and I know I need more time on this other one that's got me stumped. So I might section off some time that way, or just every project's different. So like a lot of fiction projects, you need a long runway to get there. There's a lot of research involved, and photo illustration or manipulation, or just illustration. So I'll take more time on a project like that. Maybe I have a 2 comp project for a university press, and it's more streamlined, and I might not need as much time there. So I think it helps to have a team like this, so that if we get in our schedule structure, you know how that is. It's like playing Tetris, and it's like the last level of Tetris all the time. We have a really good studio manager that helps us stay organized and on task with clients. And sometimes you need help from your peers, or you need to shift a project to someone else so that you have more time on a project that has you stumped. So we try to be flexible that way, I guess.
The project manager is definitely the real MVP of the studio, trying to play Tetris with our calendars and integrate time to read the brief, hop on calls, work on the project, and then a lot of the times that's not the end game. You have to come back with revisions or round 2s. So yeah, it's not always a linear process.
Okay.
And that helps us to have organizational structures, because if our whole day is spent in meetings or answering emails, obviously that you lose productivity. So we try to get as much time as we can locked in for the design itself.
Okay. And you also get sucked into doing these kind of these presentations. So thank you for taking the time to do that. We've got a number of more questions, probably more than we're going to have time to cover. But let me just run through a couple of them. How do you get your creative juices flowing when you're stuck on a cover? 10-Speed Press, I remember, came up with a book called Whack on the Side of the Head or something like that. Like good ways to kind of jar you out of your routine. Do you have go-tos of ways of like trying to get something going if nothing's presenting itself?
Yeah, one thing we'll do if we're really stumped, pull the team together and do a brainstorm session. I'd say more often, I'll write notes, like I'll write keywords down. I do some sketching, but it's always really rough. I think what helps me is to look at the facets of a project and just start moving. So if I'm having trouble thinking of a good visual, I'll just start playing with the type. What's the type doing? What's it look like uppercase, lowercase, script? What's it look like if I make it full bleed? What's it look like if it's really small? What if I stack it on multiple lines? All of that, there's so much you can do just with type. So if I'm having trouble with a visual, I'm going to go start playing with type. And then when I exhaust that, maybe I'll start playing with some visuals, or how do they intersect? Or
Tim
I've got-
always tells me to flip it upside down. What if you flip it upside down? I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it was funny one time we had a client tell us, we were working on a video intro for this production company. And the client said, "Can you turn the water inside out?" And we were like, "What does that mean? I don't understand that, you know?" So it just became like our go-to. Can you just turn the water inside out? I don't know exactly how that works. But yeah, I like to get in a different headspace. So maybe that's going for a walk. Often I'll be stumped on one project and I know I've got another project to work on. I'll just start working on that, and then I'll come back with fresh eyes. I think that's most helpful for me, is to get fresh eyes on it, whether it's one of my coworkers looking at it and trying to help me brainstorm, or just getting some distance from it and coming back the next morning, for example.
Tim also showed a good example today of, we work on a lot of work. And so just drawing on previous work too is super helpful, just whether that's inspiration or if it catches a new idea for a new project.
Okay, a couple of questions around, do you subcontract out illustration or photography on a project to someone? Do you commission it original work, and do you hire freelance designers, or is everything kept in-house? And do you ever recycle your designs? I'll keep that one for later.
Okay, yeah. We generally don't freelance work outside of the studio. We have in the past. It's not it's more of, there are people that we trust that we know if we get really full up, sometimes our schedule's packed and we just no way we can take an extra project on. And so in those cases, rather than just turn the work away, we might go to someone that we know is a friend of the studio and say, "Hey, you willing to work on this?" But that's not very often. It's generally not the way we like to approach it. And as far as recycling designs, I think it's like Molly was saying, and kind of what I was getting at with this idea that nothing is wasted. I don't think it's a good practice to just reheat something and throw it at another client so I can move on. But what is true is that you invest a lot in each project. Doing three plus comps on a project, when you're really pushing and trying to do something unique, inevitably there's going to be work that's left on the cutting floor that's really good. And more often what happens is I'll remember that and I'll come back to it, and I'll find a way, it'll find its way into some other work, but it won't be exactly like I'd done it there. Maybe I did a unique type treatment on a project and it didn't go through. And I think, hey, maybe I can adapt that over here and do something with it. And that it can be very helpful. It's more like the seed of an idea that finds its full expression down the road on a different project, and less like cut and paste from one client to another, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is that, I mean, you're looking for that seed regardless of the project or if it's been established or not already. So just having that extra resource is really helpful.
Well, thank you so much. We're at 1:08, so I'm going to sort of round it out. There were other great questions. I'll stay on here and I'll save it just because I think it gives a sense of how much you were had the audience engaged. Zoom can be so hard when it's this size. You don't understand how much people are laughing at your humor. I have to say, this was a lot funnier than I thought it was going to be. You guys are hysterical, as well as excellent designers. So, and yeah, Tim's willingness to throw Molly under the bus, I love that. So thank you so much. We will put this video up, and we will, if there are any resources that you want to share, anything, we can put that in the description of the video. And just thank you so much again. I really appreciate it. Wonderful designs, but also really insightful discussion on your process and the kinds of hoops that you have to jump through, but also how you do that successfully. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for putting this on. This was awesome. Thanks everyone for showing up.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.